Saela Velanese adjusted the silken folds of her ceremonial tunic, her silver hair catching the ambient glow of her ship's sleek control panels. The Arathea Dawn was the pride of the Celavarian fleet, a masterpiece of technology and elegance that was as much a symbol of their culture as it was a vessel of exploration. Yet, despite its grandeur, the ship had failed her. Alarms shrieked through the corridors, and the artificial intelligence calmly repeated the same haunting phrase. Catastrophic engine failure. Impact imminent. Brace for emergency landing. Saela's four hearts hammered in unison as the planet below filled the viewport, its untamed wilderness sprawling in hues of green and blue. This was an uncharted world, primitive, dangerous, and utterly foreign. She clung to her chair as the ship pierced the atmosphere, shaking violently. The elegant curves of the interior buckled under the strain, and Saela shut her crystalline eyes as the ground rushed toward them. When she awoke, the opulence of her surroundings had been replaced by chaos. Fires licked at shattered consoles, and the metallic tang of burning alloys filled her nostrils. Saela unbuckled her harness with trembling fingers, stumbling through the wreckage toward an emergency exit. The cool, damp air of the planet rushed in as she stepped outside, her boots sinking into soft soil. A wild expanse greeted her, towering trees, dense foliage, and skies that seemed to stretch into eternity. She was utterly alone, or so she thought. Ethan Cross had lived on the edge of civilization for as long as he could remember. When the world had gone to hell after the collapse, he'd retreated to the forests, relying on nothing but his wits and a rifle passed down by his grandfather. Years of solitude had hardened him, turning survival into second nature. He spotted the crash from miles away, a column of smoke rising into the sky like a beacon. At first, he thought it might be another scavenger ship. The prospect of dealing with desperate looters didn't appeal to him, but curiosity got the better of him. When he arrived at the crash site, what he saw took his breath away. The wreckage wasn't human. The metal shimmered in the sunlight with a strange, otherworldly sheen, and the design was unlike anything he'd ever seen. And then there was her. She emerged from the wreckage like some kind of ethereal goddess, tall, with luminous skin that seemed to glow faintly in the twilight. Her silver hair cascaded down her back, and her large, liquid eyes scanned the forest with a mixture of fear and determination. Ethan stepped forward, his boots crunching on fallen leaves. The sound made her spin around, and their eyes met. "Stay back," she commanded, her voice resonating with an almost musical quality. Ethan raised his hands, trying to appear non-threatening. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "Looks like you could use some help." Her gaze narrowed. "You're kind. You are primitive. I require no assistance from barbarians." Ethan couldn't help but chuckle. "Suit yourself, lady. But out here, you won't last a day without someone who knows the land." Despite her initial resistance, Saela quickly realized that Ethan's skills were indispensable. The forest was a hostile place, teeming with predators and hidden dangers. Her advanced technology was damaged, and her survival depended on this gruff human whose methods were as crude as they were effective. Ethan taught her how to build shelter, start a fire with flint, and forage for edible plants. At first, Saela balked at the dirt and sweat that came with manual labor, but necessity overcame her pride. To her surprise, she found a strange satisfaction in the work. It was grounding in a way her life aboard the Arathea Dawn had never been. As the days turned into weeks, the dynamic between them shifted. Saela began to see Ethan not as a barbarian, but as a man of extraordinary resilience and resourcefulness. His every action, from the way he tracked animals to the way he protected her during a nighttime predator attack, spoke of a quiet strength that transcended the boundaries of their species. For his part, Ethan found himself drawn to Saela's intellect and determination. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Alien, yes, but also fiercely intelligent and surprisingly compassionate. Their uneasy alliance became a partnership and then something deeper. Together, they explored the forest, searching for materials to repair Saela's ship. In their travels, they discovered ancient ruins buried beneath the undergrowth, structures that suggested this planet had once been home to a civilization far older than either of their species. Saela's scientific curiosity was piqued, and Ethan found himself swept up in her excitement as they uncovered relics and deciphered inscriptions. But their explorations also attracted unwanted attention. A predator unlike any they had encountered, a massive, insectoid creature with razor-sharp limbs, stalked them through the ruins. It attacked without warning, forcing Ethan and Saela to work together to bring it down. The battle was brutal, and Ethan sustained a deep gash across his arm, but they prevailed. As they sat by the fire that night, Ethan tending to his wound, Saela looked at him with newfound respect. "You're not what I expected," she admitted. "And you're not half as stuck up as I thought," Ethan replied with a grin. As their bond deepened, Saela revealed more about herself and her mission. She was an envoy, sent to explore the galaxy and establish peaceful relations with emerging civilizations. Her people had dismissed humans as too primitive to be of interest, but now she saw the flaw in their assumptions. Ethan, in turn, shared his story, the collapse of human society, the rise of factions, and his decision to live apart from it all. But their growing connection was threatened when Saela's distress signal finally reached her people. A rescue ship was on its way, and with it came the harsh reality of their situation. Saela's people would never approve of her association with a human, let alone her newfound respect for their kind. And Ethan, fiercely independent and wary of authority, had no intention of becoming a subject of alien scrutiny. The sound of distant engines echoed through the forest, signaling the approach of Saela's rescue ship. "I can't go back," Saela said, her voice heavy with emotion. "Not like this." "You don't have to," Ethan replied. "You've got a choice, Saela. We both do." As the rescue ship descended, its lights cutting through the twilight, Saela and Ethan stood together, their fates hanging in the balance. The alien craft descended with a hum that resonated through the forest. Its sleek, angular design bore the unmistakable markings of the Salivarian fleet. A hatch opened, revealing a ramp that extended toward the forest floor. Saela's heart clenched as three figures emerged, her people, clad in polished exosuits that gleamed under the ship's lights. Arithea envoy Saela Velanese. One of them announced, their voice amplified and devoid of warmth. "Your distress signal was received. Prepare for immediate extraction." Saela glanced at Ethan. He stood still, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his face unreadable. She wanted to explain, to plead her case, but she knew her people too well. To them, humans were barely more than animals, a dangerous, primitive species unworthy of diplomacy. "Wait," Saela said, stepping forward. Her voice trembled slightly, but she steadied herself. "There's more to this planet than we realized. I've made discoveries, both scientific and personal. I need to stay longer." The leader of the Salivarian crew tilted their head, their shimmering visor reflecting Saela's anxious face. "That is inadvisable. This planet is hostile. Your safety cannot be guaranteed. Our mission is to return you to Selivar for debriefing." "And what of him?" another crew member asked, their gaze shifting to Ethan. "Why is a local involved?" Saela hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "He saved my life. More than once. Without him, I wouldn't be standing here." The crew exchanged looks. "The human cannot come with us. Salivarian law prohibits the transport of primitive species. His presence here is irrelevant to your duty." Ethan let out a dry chuckle, stepping forward. "Don't worry, I wasn't planning on hitching a ride." His tone was casual, but Saela could sense the tension beneath his words. "But I'd appreciate it if you didn't treat me like some stray dog." The leader of the Salivarians ignored him, addressing Saela again. "You are wasting time. The longer we remain, the greater the risk of attracting predators, or worse." Saela's mind raced. If she left with him, she would never see Ethan again. Her people would never accept what she had come to understand, that humans were more than their perceived barbarism. They were resilient, creative, and capable of greatness. Ethan embodied those qualities in ways that even her own people often lacked. "No," Saela said firmly. "I won't go." The crew stiffened. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she continued, her voice rising with conviction. "I have a responsibility here, to complete my mission and to understand this planet, its history, and its people. I won't abandon that just because it's inconvenient. The Celavarians exchanged uneasy glances. Your actions will be reported, envoy. Defiance of orders has consequences. So be it, Saela replied, crossing her arms. As the Celavarian crew retreated to their ship, muttering amongst themselves, Saela turned to Ethan. He raised an eyebrow. That was unexpected. Saela smiled wryly. You're not the only one capable of going against the grain. Guess I'm rubbing off on you, Ethan said, his lips quirking into a rare smile. Then his expression turned serious. You know this won't end well for you, right? They're not just going to let you stay here. I'm aware, Saela admitted, but I couldn't leave. Not without knowing what we could discover together. Ethan studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right then, let's make it count. With the Celavarian ship gone, Saela and Ethan returned to their exploration of the ancient ruins. The structures grew more intricate as they ventured deeper into the forest. Walls carved with alien symbols told fragments of a story, of a civilization that thrived here long before either of their species existed. Saela's analytical mind was in overdrive. These inscriptions, they're unlike anything in the Celavarian database. It's as if this language evolved independently, untouched by external influence. Which means, Ethan prompted, crouching beside her as she traced a symbol. It means this civilization may have been the origin point for something far greater, Saela replied, her voice tinged with awe. Perhaps even a precursor to interstellar life as we know it. Ethan whistled low. And now it's all gone. Just ruins and bones. Not entirely gone, Saela said, her gaze drifting to a massive stone doorway partially hidden by vines. There's something behind here. I can feel it. Together, they worked to clear the entrance, using a combination of Ethan's physical strength and Saela's advanced tools. The door groaned open, revealing a dark passage that led into the earth. The air inside was cool and damp, carrying a faint metallic tang. Bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls, casting an eerie glow over the chamber. As they descended, they discovered intricate murals depicting a story of rise and fall, a golden age of prosperity, followed by a cataclysmic event that shattered the civilization. At the heart of the chamber stood a pedestal, upon which rested a strange, glowing artifact. It pulsed faintly, its light casting strange shadows on the walls. Saela approached it cautiously, her scanner in hand. This energy signature, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. It could be a power source or a weapon. Ethan hung back, his instincts on high alert. You sure messing with that thing is a good idea? Before Saela could respond, the artifact emitted a low hum, and the chamber trembled. Ancient machinery stirred to life, and a voice echoed through the air. A voice that spoke in the same language as the ruins, its tone deep and commanding. What is it saying? Ethan asked, gripping his rifle tightly. Saela's eyes widened as she processed the words. It's a warning against something called the Shard of Eternals. Ethan frowned. And I'm guessing this thing isn't just a fancy flashlight. Before they could react further, the ground beneath them began to shift. Stone panels slid away to reveal a network of tunnels, and from the darkness came the sound of movement. Something large and many-legged, advancing rapidly. Barbarian or not, Saela said, her voice tight with fear, I hope you're as good at fighting as you claim. Ethan chambered a round in his rifle. Guess we're about to find out. The echoes of clicking limbs and guttural hisses filled the chamber, reverberating off the ancient walls. Saela's crystalline eyes darted toward the artifact as its pulsing glow intensified, casting sharp shadows across the room. The hum had turned into a rhythmic thrum, almost like a heartbeat. Back to the entrance, Ethan barked, his voice steady despite the rising tension. We can't. Saela protested, her gaze fixed on the pedestal. The artifact is the key to understanding what happened here. If we leave it, we might never. Then grab it and run. Ethan cut her off, raising his rifle as the first of the creatures skittered into view. They were massive, insectoid beings with glistening carapaces that shimmered like liquid metal in the dim light. Their multifaceted eyes reflected the artifact's glow, and their serrated limbs scraped against the floor with unsettling precision. Saela hesitated for only a second before snatching the artifact. The instant her hands closed around it, the chamber was flooded with a blinding light. The creatures shrieked in unison, recoiling as if in pain. "Go!" Ethan yelled, firing his rifle at the nearest one. The shot struck true, splitting its exoskeleton and sending greenish fluid splattering across the floor. But more were coming, dozens, maybe hundreds. Saela didn't argue this time. Clutching the artifact, she sprinted toward the entrance, Ethan close behind her. The glowing fungi dimmed as the chamber trembled, the walls shifting as if alive. They burst out of the ruins just as the ground behind them gave way, swallowing the entrance in a deafening collapse. The artifact in Saela's hands continued to pulse, but its light had dimmed to a faint, steady glow. "That thing better be worth it," Ethan said, panting as he scanned the tree line for any sign of pursuit, "because it nearly got us both killed." "It's more than worth it," Saela replied, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and exhilaration. "This artifact, it's not just a relic. It's a power source, a repository of knowledge, maybe even a weapon. Whatever it is, it's ancient, older than anything I've ever encountered." "And those things in there?" Ethan asked. "What's their deal?" "I don't know," Saela admitted, "but they weren't natural. They were guardians, designed to protect the shard. Whatever happened to this civilization, they went to great lengths to ensure no one could claim its secrets." "Yeah, well, they didn't do a great job," Ethan said, nodding toward the glowing artifact, "because now it's in your hands." Saela's grip on the artifact tightened. "And that's exactly what I'm afraid of." The next few days were a blur of movement. The artifact's energy seemed to emit a subtle signal, something that resonated not only through the forest but through Saela herself. She began to experience vivid dreams of the civilization that had created it, glimpses of their advanced technology and their ultimate downfall. Ethan noticed the changes in her. She grew quieter, more introspective, and her already pale skin seemed almost translucent under the artifact's glow. "You're not sleeping," he said one evening as they camped beside a stream. Saela sat cross-legged, the artifact resting in her lap. "I don't need to. The shard. It's showing me things. Visions of the past. I think it's trying to communicate." Ethan frowned. "Or it's messing with your head. That thing is dangerous, Saela. You've seen what it can do. Maybe we should leave it behind." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of wonder and defiance. "If we leave it, we'll never know the truth. This artifact could change everything we understand about the galaxy, about our place in it. Or it could get us both killed," Ethan countered. "Those guardians weren't the only things out here hunting for it. I can feel it." As if on cue, the distant sound of engines broke the stillness of the night. Saela's people were coming back, but they weren't alone. The rescue ship had returned, but it wasn't here for a peaceful extraction. 3 smaller crafts descended alongside it, bristling with weapons. These weren't explorers, they were enforcers. Saela stood, the artifact glowing brighter in her hands. "They must have detected the artifact's energy signature. They're here to take it back." Ethan slung his rifle over his shoulder and began packing up their camp. "We're not sticking around to find out how friendly they are. Let's move." The two of them melted into the forest, using the dense foliage as cover. But the Celivarian enforcers were relentless, deploying drones that scanned the area with beams of light. As they ran, Saela's mind raced. She knew her people would stop at nothing to retrieve the artifact. To them, it wasn't just a relic. It was a threat, something that could disrupt the balance of power in the galaxy. "We can't outrun them forever," she said, her breath coming in gasps. "We need a plan." Ethan stopped, scanning their surroundings. "If they're tracking the artifact, we need to make them think we've still got it while we lead them away." Saela hesitated, then nodded. She reached into her bag, pulling out a device that could mimic the artifact's energy signature. Setting it to emit a decoy signal, she placed it on the ground. "This will buy us some time," she said. Ethan smirked. "You're catching on, princess." As they continued deeper into the forest, they stumbled upon another ruin. This one even more massive than the first. Its towering spires jutted out of the ground like jagged teeth, and the air around it crackled with latent energy. The source, Saela whispered, her eyes wide. This is where the shard was created. Ethan eyed the ruins warily. And probably where we'll find more of those bug things. We don't have a choice, Saela said. If we can activate the technology here, it might help us understand the shard and stop my people from taking it. Reluctantly, Ethan followed her inside. The interior of the ruin was alive with energy, the walls covered in glowing symbols that pulsed in time with the artifact. As Saela approached a central console, the shard in her hands resonated with a deep hum. The console flared to life, projecting a holographic map of the galaxy. Saela gasped. This is a network. These artifacts, they're connected. They form a chain of energy that spans entire star systems. And if someone gets control of all of them? Ethan asked. They'd wield power beyond anything we can imagine, Saela replied, her voice tinged with awe and fear. Their discovery was interrupted by a deafening roar. From the shadows emerged a new kind of guardian, larger, faster, and more lethal than the ones they had encountered before. Ethan raised his rifle, his jaw tightening. We're running out of tricks, Saela. Then we'll have to improvise, she said, activating the console. The ruin trembled as ancient mechanisms stirred to life, their energy flooding into the artifact. The ground shook, and the guardians closed in. The chamber trembled violently as ancient machinery roared to life, its energy flowing into the shard of Eternals like rivers into a vast, otherworldly ocean. The artifact in Saela's hands glowed so brightly that it was painful to look at, casting sharp, otherworldly shadows on the towering walls. Symbols along the ruins flared with light, creating intricate patterns that seemed to dance with purpose. Ethan backed up, rifle raised, as the towering guardian surged forward, its metallic limbs slicing through the air with terrifying precision. Anytime you want to figure out how that thing works, Saela, would be great. I'm trying, Saela shouted, her hands flying over the console as alien glyphs flickered across its surface. It's a failsafe. These ruins were designed to protect the shard, but they can also— Oh no. Oh no. Ethan's voice was tight, his aim steady as he fired another shot into the creature's carapace. The bullet struck true, staggering the guardian but not stopping it. We're in an oh no situation now? Saela barely heard him. Her mind raced as the shard's energy surged through her. The visions she had been seeing became clearer, more vivid. The ancient builders of the ruins, tall, radiant beings with multi-limbed forms and crystalline eyes, were communicating directly with her. They had created the shard as both a power source and a weapon, a last line of defense against a force they only called the Eternal Devourer. The Guardians had been programmed to protect the shard at all costs, even if it meant eliminating any intruders. The shard is waking up the rest of the network, Saela said, her voice trembling. If we don't stop it, the energy it releases could destroy everything within a 100-mile radius, or more. Then shut it down, Ethan shouted, dodging a massive claw swipe. He fired again, the recoil jolting his shoulder as another guardian emerged from the shadows. I can't shut it down, Saela said, but I can reprogram it. If I link it to the ruin's core, I can stabilize the energy and deactivate the guardians, but I need time. Time was the one thing they didn't have. The first guardian was already recovering from Ethan's assault, its claws gouging the stone floor as it lunged forward again. A second one was closing in, its metallic limbs gleaming in the flickering light. Ethan planted his feet, switching to the shotgun slung over his back. I'll buy you as much time as I can. Saela looked at him, her crystalline eyes wide with fear. You can't fight them alone. Maybe not, Ethan said with a wry grin. But I'm not about to let some overgrown bug guts ruin your big moment. Before Saela could protest further, Ethan sprinted toward the Guardians, firing his shotgun in controlled bursts. The blast sent shards of exoskeleton flying, forcing the creatures to focus on him instead of Saela. Come on, you ugly bastards, Ethan shouted, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. You want to fight? Let's dance. Saela turned back to the console, her fingers moving faster than she thought possible. The glyphs resisted her commands at first, but she pushed harder, pouring her will into the interface. The visions grew sharper, guiding her toward the right sequences. The ruins trembled again, but this time it wasn't the Guardians causing it. Energy began to flow from the shard into the core of the structure, stabilizing the volatile currents that had been threatening to explode. Ethan's movements were slowing. His ammunition was running low, and every step he took was heavier than the last. One of the Guardians cornered him, its blade-like limb sweeping toward his chest. Ethan ducked, narrowly avoiding the strike, but the second Guardian was faster. Its claw slashed across his side, drawing a pained grunt. "Saela!" he yelled, blood staining his shirt. "Tell me you're almost done." The console emitted a high-pitched tone as the final sequence locked into place. The glyphs pulsed once, then faded, replaced by a soft blue glow that spread across the entire chamber. The Guardians froze mid-attack, their limbs retracting as they powered down and collapsed like marionettes with cut strings. Ethan stumbled back, clutching his side. Saela ran to him, her expression frantic. "Ethan, you're hurt." "I'll live," he muttered, though his pale face and unsteady stance said otherwise. Saela knelt beside him, activating a small medical device from her belt. The device emitted a soft hum as it sealed the wound, but Ethan still winced. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly, her hands trembling as she worked. "Yeah, I did," Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the pain. "You're the one with the brains to figure all this out. I'm just the guy who keeps the bugs off your back." Saela smiled faintly, her silver hair falling into her face. "You're much more than that, Ethan." As the chamber settled into an uneasy calm, Saela turned her attention back to the shard. Its glow was dimmer now, but its energy remained potent. The visions returned, and Saela saw the builders of the ruins once more. They warned of a terrible truth. The shard was only one of many scattered across the galaxy. Together, they formed a network that could either be a source of infinite power or a weapon of unimaginable destruction. "If the wrong hands find them," Saela whispered, her voice trailing off. Ethan leaned heavily against the console, his expression grim. "Then we make sure the wrong hands don't." "How?" Saela asked. "Even my people can't fully control this technology. And now that we've activated the network, others will come. My people, scavengers, empires looking for power." Ethan looked her in the eyes. "We find the others first. Shut them down, bury them. Whatever it takes." Saela hesitated, the weight of his words sinking in. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about preventing a galaxy-wide catastrophe. "Then we'll need allies," she said. "And a plan." Ethan smirked. "We'll figure it out. We've already made it this far, haven't we?" Saela looked at him, her resolve hardening. "Together, then?" The chamber grew quiet as the two of them stood amidst the ruins, the shard glowing softly between them, a beacon of hope and a harbinger of the challenges to come. The days that followed were a blur of planning, recovery, and relentless caution. Saela and Ethan knew the activation of the shard had sent ripples through the galaxy. Somewhere, sensors were pinging, warnings were being logged, and ships were preparing to trace the energy signature. They had no time to lose. Saela's knowledge of the shard's network gave them a faint lead. Another artifact lay on a distant moon, orbiting a gas giant at the edge of known space. The holographic map from the ruins showed it pulsing faintly, a faint echo of the power they had just unleashed. "We need to get there before anyone else," Saela said, her tone resolute. Ethan frowned. "And how do you propose we cross half the galaxy? In case you didn't notice, my transportation methods don't exactly involve warp drives." Saela's crystalline eyes lit with an idea. "My people's rescue ship, they'll have detected my presence and left surveillance drones to monitor the planet. If we can hijack one," Ethan sighed, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "Stealing from aliens now. Why not?" Tracking the drones wasn't hard. Saela's devices pinpointed the nearest one, a sleek, spherical craft hovering silently over the forest canopy. With Ethan's survivalist ingenuity and Saela's advanced tech, they devised a trap. A decoy signal lured the drone into a clearing, and a carefully timed electromagnetic pulse knocked it out of commission. As Saela hacked into its systems, Ethan stood guard, scanning the tree line with his rifle. "This better not call for backup," Ethan muttered. It won't, Saela replied, her fingers dancing over the drone's interface. Moments later, a low hum filled the air as she established a connection with the Barbarian surveillance network. The rescue ship's location appeared on the screen. There, she said, a few miles east. If we can reach it undetected, I can override its systems and use it to leave the planet. And if your people show up while we're joyriding? Ethan asked. Then we improvise, Saela said with a faint smile. Reaching the ship was a nerve-wracking endeavor. Barbarian sentries patrolled the area, scanning for intruders. Ethan's survival instincts proved invaluable as he guided Saela through the underbrush, avoiding detection with a precision born of years in the wilderness. Once aboard, Saela quickly overrode the ship's systems, locking out any external commands. The sleek craft hummed to life, its engines powering up as it prepared for liftoff. As they broke through the atmosphere, Ethan gazed out at the shrinking planet below. Well, this is a first for me, he said. Leaving Earth. Saela glanced at him, her expression softening. You're braver than most people I've met, Ethan. It's time the galaxy saw that humans are capable of more than they think. The journey to the moon of Virion was uneventful, but the tension grew with every passing moment. When they arrived, the gas giant loomed like a massive sentinel, its swirling storms casting eerie shadows on the moon's cratered surface. As they descended, Saela scanned for signs of the next artifact. The energy readings led them to a cavern carved into the side of a massive ridge. Unlike the first ruins, these were intact, their architecture exuding an oppressive grandeur. This feels different, Saela said as they entered. More deliberate, like it was meant to be found only by those who knew where to look. And we just kicked the front door open, Ethan muttered. Inside the cavern, they found the second artifact, resting on a pedestal surrounded by towering statues of the ancient builders. But as Saela reached for it, the statues began to glow, their eyes lighting up with the same energy as the shard. A deep, resonant voice filled the chamber, speaking in the builder's language. Saela translated aloud, her voice trembling. They're warning us again, she said. But this time, it's not just about the shards. They're saying the network isn't just a power source, it's a prison. The shards were created to contain something. Let me guess, Ethan said. Something worse than those bugs back on Earth. Saela nodded, her expression grim. The Eternal Devourer. A force so destructive that it nearly consumed their entire civilization. They trapped it in a dimensional rift, using the shards to seal the boundaries. But every time a shard is activated, the prison gets weaker, Ethan finished, his jaw tightening. And we just lit the beacon. Before they could act, the cavern shook violently. The activation of the second artifact had triggered a chain reaction, and the prison's boundaries were beginning to falter. Tendrils of dark energy seeped into the room, twisting and writhing like living shadows. We have to shut it down, Saela shouted, rushing to the pedestal. Ethan stood his ground, firing at the tendrils as they reached for her. Whatever you're doing, do it fast. Saela's hands flew over the pedestal's controls, her mind racing as she tried to decipher the ancient interface. Finally, she found a way to redirect the energy, sending it back into the network to reinforce the prison. But the process required more power than the artifact alone could provide. Saela's gaze snapped to Ethan. It needs a living conduit. Someone has to channel the energy. Ethan didn't hesitate. What happens if I do it? It might kill you, Saela said, tears welling in her eyes. Or worse. Ethan gave her a faint smile. You said it yourself. I'm more than a barbarian. Before she could stop him, he stepped onto the pedestal. The energy surged through him, his body racked with pain as the network absorbed his life force. The tendrils recoiled, and the cavern began to stabilize. Ethan, Saela screamed, rushing to his side as the light faded. He collapsed into her arms, his face pale but peaceful. You did it, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Told you we'd figure it out. Ethan didn't survive the ordeal, but his sacrifice sealed the prison and saved the galaxy from the Eternal Devourer. Saela buried him beneath the ruins, carving his name into the stone with the tools of her people. When she finally left the moon, the shard in her possession, she made a vow. She would dedicate her life to protecting the network, ensuring the shards never fell into the wrong hands. And she would tell the galaxy about Ethan Cross, the so-called barbarian who showed her what true strength really meant.